everybody, I'm Tom Vassell.
I'm Joey Evans.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
And today we're taking a look at a pretty big game here, and I mean that in every sense of the fashion, Sleeping Gods, Distant Skies. This is the sequel from Ryan Laukat to, well, Sleeping Gods. That was a game in which you were on a boat that got sucked into a portal to another world. Well, we've upgraded to a plane that gets sucked into another world. You do not need to have played the first game to enjoy or play this one. It is definitely... It's a sequel, but you don't need to know anything from one game to the other. There's also enough differences, a lot of differences, I think, that we have to talk about this as a completely separate game. I don't want to spoil too much for you, but I'll show you a little bit about how the game works. There's a lot going on in this game, so I'm not going to go over every part of it. I'm just going to give you some basic concepts. You're going to be playing through these 5 characters. Each of these characters has different skills. You're going to keep track of your hit points here. They have special abilities on them that you can use. You'll split them up between the players. You'll be going around a book like this, so you'll have a token that represents your party that you'll be moving around. You also have an airplane, and you'll be able to use your airplane to fly. So this shows page 16. I could fly to page 2. You have to spend a certain number of fuel to get there. And then when you get there, you'll go onto this spot. You can even fly off the board to a special card as you're flying around. And then once you're on the board, you're going to be moving around the board. So you have your airplane here, and there's health points of the airplane and fuel. And if you're out of fuel, you get a certain quest. Whenever you go a certain distance between different numbers, you can take more damage based on different draws that you'll have. But as you go around the board, you'll see these different numbers here. And when you get to these numbers, you're going to be going to a book. And this book is full of all sorts of adventures. Sometimes the adventure is a page that will have something happen to you, different things. Sometimes you'll end up fighting a giant boss on a page. And sometimes you'll come across a spot where you're going to be all placing your different characters on different sections here on the board to do various things that will give you different rewards. And I'm going to be pretty vague as possible as you go through this because there's a lot in this book. You can see kind of how many pages are in the book. Players are going to be a lot of times using these little cards here, these ability cards, and they're going to do various things. You'll have a chance to tuck these cards under your character to add to their skills. This will increase your skills. And the skills are used a lot whenever you have to make different tests. You'll be flipping a card over and looking at this number and then adding the number of icons based on what the type of test is. And then there's other things that you can use. There's a bunch of different items that you're trying to get. Most of these items are important so that you can find and activate different totems. As the game progresses, you will often get quest cards. Quest cards will often give you different keywords. They'll tell you something happens and they'll give you a keyword which will change a future thing. Sometimes they show you a picture. I really like these. And when you find that exact picture on the board somewhere, like here you can search for treasure, but sometimes it will give you a specific adventure when you find that picture. So different players are going to take turns, and you're going to have this compass token here, and this is basically how many actions you have. You can pass on your turn, which will give more actions to the next person if you want to. And you're going to be turning over event cards. There's an event deck here that will be made up of level 1s, 2s, and 3s. Basically, the different kinds of events that you put in it will determine the difficulty in the game. You're also going to be getting various adventure cards as the game goes by. These are equipment, some are weapons, some are totems that are different special things that you need to find. Sometimes a totem will require you to turn in a certain number of resources to activate it. That's a big feature of the game. When the game starts, you're going to be getting some of these right away. Equipment cards, a lot of these different cards that you will have can be played to do various things. Like you normally would take a damage or spend more time when you go into a mountain spot on the board, but this lets you ignore that one time. Every time you play these, you'll discard them into this pile. And whenever you decide to camp, camping here is a big part of the game because when you camp, you're going to be marking off one of your campfires on this sheet of paper. This sheet of paper keeps track of stuff in between games, or in between a game. If you want to pause your game and play, you can keep track of everything here. It also tells you how to set for easy, normal, and hard, or you can even, I don't know, I just play it easy. But these will be a certain number of campaigns. Even here, if you want to play a longer campaign, then you'd mark here whenever you get defeated in battle. On the other side is this map, and you can mark information on the map if you're trying to look and see how all the different boards fit together. But whenever you camp, players are going to be able to get some hit points back, to be able to get these tokens back. That's how you use special abilities and stuff. Refresh adventure cards. You'll take all the adventure cards that are here. You'll start with some and get more as the game goes by. Shuffle them and give them out to all the different players. Not shuffle them, I guess you decide who gets what. So that's a big part of the game. It's just going around, exploring, finding stories, knowing when to use these cards, using these little skill cards, upgrading your character, and you're going to go off and have combat and other adventures. I'll mention combat real briefly. In combat, usually you're going to come across some enemy cards, and it will tell you enemy 36 and enemy 37. So here we have a skeleton and a frost weaver. Now probably these two aren't fighting you together, but whatever. And then you're going to be taking turns attacking them with various attack cards, and you're trying to cover up all the hit points on them. Now, they're going to be growing in power and hitting you back every time you hit them. They have special abilities, which whenever you hit them, you can cover up one of their special abilities rather than hit points. It's going to take longer to kill them, but they stop poisoning you or whatever they might do to you. And so combats can be used by players playing different combat cards. So there are going to be some starting adventure cards that you'll get. So you'll start with some Stoop, which if you change this to heal hit points and give someone some more tokens and different cards. But there's also going to be a little deck of combat cards. Now, as the game goes by and you find new adventure cards, you can add those cards to this deck, and you can then subtract cards. There's a minimum number of cards a deck needs to be. But before combat, you're going to shuffle this deck and give them out. These are the starter ones. And this will show how much damage it does. And many times you're rolling dice, so you can do even more damage with them. Or it might, this one, for example, lets you attack an adjacent enemy. And when you do hits and different things on the enemies, you sometimes will get these bonuses for another character to go. So each character will be assigned one of these cards to use. These cards are not particularly good at the beginning of the game, but you're going to find much better combat cards as the game goes by. So you're going to be, again, I'm kind of rambling around a little bit here, giving you some ideas, but overall, throughout the game itself, you're going to be playing through. You can rest whenever you want, but after a certain number of rests, the game will end. You are going through an event, and then a player has a certain number of actions they can spend in their turn. Their turns can be moving on the board. Obstacles, of course, can cause damage to you. Exploring, looking at the different numbers, getting into the airplane and flying it, fixing your airplane, or eventually at some point, like I said, you can rest. Now, beyond that, there's a big overarching story. I don't want to spoil it, but hopefully that gives you an idea of how the game plays. You're just going to go until you lose/win, or at least till you're done with these campfires, and you'll find out if you've accomplished your goals or not. But there's enough space in the map and stuff that you'll be able to move, maybe you'll discover all these pages, but in the next game you might go to this area and try out these spots here. All right, component-wise and everything, it's pretty much very similar to the first game. It uses Ryan Laukatt's artwork. I think the writing by Ryan and his wife and anyone else who helped them with this, looks like there's Brenna Arplund is the third writer, him and Mallory and Brenna. I think all that's very well done. There's a lot of components in the games and stuff going on. I thought it was good components overall. The only thing I did not love, component-wise, was the tutorial teach, which they said, if you read this, you don't need the rule book, but you do anyway. You kind of need the rule book. And the tutorial is written as a comic, but then we'll pause and have you play part of the game. And I think that tutorial will work for many people. I don't know that it will work for everyone. For me, it was just easier to go through the rule book.
And you end up doing that anyway, because we did the comic method, but then I found myself going to the book several times throughout anyway. I agree.
And it's interesting because I purposely went the comic book route because I knew I was going to be playing it for purpose of a review, and I wanted to be able to incorporate that into the review. But my gut instinct is that if I wasn't doing it, specifically for a review, I would have tried to just do it right from the rule book and not incorporated that. And it almost is like they really want you to do the book no matter what. Just to give you some background, right? You miss part of the story. So I would recommend that anybody, whether you've played Sleeping Gods or not, go through, even if you don't do and you know what? You should do the little tutorial combat too, because combat is significantly different. Just go through it. It won't take long.
Yeah, I really like this game. I really enjoyed the first one. The first one is in my top 100 games of all time. This one is a follow-up to that. And I want to make that clear at the beginning here because I have a few nitpicks with the game. But that's because I like it so much. I also cannot talk about this game without mentioning the first one. It's just the way it is because there's a lot of comparisons to them. So my two major nitpicks, and again, I want to say there's a lot of good things. One is that combat is a little weirdly non-thematic for me. I mean, the combat in these games is always, you're fighting two people, and it's not a quick fight. Fighting here is an epic thing. It pauses the game. In fact, they decided to even go more epic with bosses that you fight, which are humongous. But it's just weird to me that the bad guys, if you are not covering up different spots in them, are leveling up and getting stronger as the fight goes by. And I don't know why that really bothers me from a thematic level. If I'm fighting some orcs and I stab him in the leg, he's not getting stronger. But in this game, that's how it works.
Yeah, the battle thing I did like. I like the polyomino aspect of it. Like Sleeping Gods, the first one, I have not played. I sat in for somebody for a round or two, but I haven't actually fully. So this is my first foray into this. I like the polyomino part of the battling. I also like how you do kind of splash damage to the one adjacent, next to him. I also liked building your deck. When you get a new weapon, you're excited to put that into your kind of battle deck. But I agree as far as for me, I did like the combat aspect. And I like the choices on what to cover. But also the fact that you're pretty much just trying to stop them from powering up at the end of each round. That was what I found myself doing with everything I fought, just trying to reduce how hard they're going to hit you back.
Yeah, I can't argue with the thematic disconnect of enemies getting stronger the more you hit them. I mean, that's a disconnect. No question about that. But in every other sense, I think that the combat has been improved significantly over Sleeping Gods. Sleeping Gods, the original game, combat was even more, I felt, of a pulling you out of what you were doing. And it was much more laborious. It was much more difficult, first off, than it is in Distant Skies. I think after that first combat, because, I got pretty wrecked on my first fight. But then beyond that, once I started getting more of the ability cards, which are so much easier to get equipped and you can have so many more of them, that's a big improvement. That I felt more powerful in this game than I did in Sleeping Gods. And so, yeah, I wouldn't argue with the disconnect because there is a thematic weirdness there. But in every other sense, I much preferred the combat in this. It let me feel powerful, and I never once felt powerful in Sleeping Gods. If I won, it was always like, just by the skin of my teeth, and maybe that's the experience you want. I do feel like Distant Skies is an easier game overall than Sleeping Gods. I played Sleeping Gods exclusively in the easy mode. I played Distant Skies in normal mode, and I felt like it was a fine challenge, but still very beatable.
Yeah, I agree on that. It's definitely easier, and in fact, there's different modes in the game. I personally prefer to play on the easiest mode possible. It was funny because Joey was like, I'm playing normal because I get full playing kids games.
Right.
But when it comes to difficulty in co-op games, I always play on the easiest. Video game or thing. And then if I want it to be harder, it can be harder. For me, easy levels where I want this one to be. And if you played the original Sleeping Gods, you don't start with anything. And if you play in easy mode, you might get a weapon. Here, you just start with a bunch of stuff. And this game has this funny little deck building thing with the combat deck. They're like, when you add a card, you have to have at least 14 cards, but you can go down to 14 if you want. My decks will always have 14 cards.
Yep.
I will never go over that.
Yep.
The only way I would go over that is if I got 15 new cool cards. I might
Right.
keep all of them, but I will take out every single one of those starter cards. No questions asked.
I would say that I don't want to spoil anything, but if you were playing through a second or third campaign, there is a strategic reason why you might want to have a larger combat deck. But I agree with you. In your first time through, keep it lean. Every time you get a new exciting thing, get rid of one of the starter pieces of combat, a weapon or what have you. But there is, without going into too much detail, there is a reason why you might want a larger combat deck if you're on a second or third campaign.
So I have three minor things. The other one is a pretty major thing as to why I don't like this game quite as much as the original one, although I will say mechanically this one improves on almost every single way. Combat is better. Fewer characters is better because there's 5 to 11. The way adventure cards work is better. There's a whole lot less one-time use and you'll never see it again type cards. You get them back every time you rest, which is fantastic. And we get it back and Joey's like, I've always wanted that card. I'm like, fine, you can have it. You just switch stuff around. That's great.
Yeah.
Sleeping Gods was a game in which you were thrust into a world you didn't know why, and you went around and you found different things, and there was an overall story, but it was very background-ish, and you were just doing all these different side quests. Distant Skies is like, this is a story. You know it out the gate. You know what's going on. They're explaining things to you, and everything focuses on that. And so I found that I didn't have as much freedom to go around and do whatever I wanted. I mean, I should rephrase that. You still have freedom to go anywhere you want, but there felt like a much more like, hey, go there. That's a good thing to do, as opposed to me going, I'll go this direction this time. I'll go this direction this time. To the point where I almost wonder if when I play this, if I played it 3 or 4 times, which again is a lot of times playing this game, that I might skip some of that opening stuff because I'm going to see those areas a ton.
Right.
While in Sleeping Gods, you could play 4 games immediately and see something different each time and just go a different direction. So it has a much looser, the first one is much looser, like, do what you want. This one is more of a, hey, there's a bigger story.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there because obviously we're going to have to be making comparisons. We've been doing it so far and we'll continue to do it. I think what you're mentioning here is one of the key differences between the two. Distant Skies feels to me geographically smaller, if that makes sense, but just as expansive in what you can do. It feels a little bit more closely packed, but there's just more stuff to do in whatever Atlas page you may be on. So I think that's one big difference. The other big difference that I agree with you on is that there is more direction given to the player in Distant Skies than there was in Sleeping Gods. And your preference as a gamer as to whether you want more clear direction or you want to, go wherever you want, which again, you will be doing in Distant Skies, but I just feel like your tasks are so much more straightforward. What you're trying to do, the overall thing you're trying to do is the same essentially in this as you were in Sleeping Gods, but how you do it I think is much more, it's less opaque. In this one, you know exactly what you need to do to, it's not a spoiler, you're trying to awaken totems. You know exactly what you need to do here. In Sleeping Gods, you didn't. It was a little bit more of a mystery element. Here, it's, you don't exactly know where you're going to get the things you need, but you know the things you need without question. And I prefer that as a gamer. You might, like Tom, prefer more of this, just go off and take any side quest you want. You'll eventually get to the end.
I think I'm comparing it more to like Seventh Continent, that when I first played that, I didn't want any type of rails whatsoever. I wanted a full open world. That taught me that I do want those guidelines and rails. So this has that, and it guides you. I do kind of wish the minor things that happened kind of filtered back into the story a little bit more, because it is really just about, those totems and things like that. There's a one story arc and very small branches. I kind of wish there was a few more kind of side things to do.
Now, that may happen in the future. One of the things they did smartly with the airplane is allowing you to go off and do things. And I got one expansion with this. The airplane can fly to a new page, so they can just be like, there's 20 more pages to fly to if they want to. Overall, for me, I really like the game. I want to be clear. I'm doing little minor things. I'm giving it an 8.5. I mentioned my concerns on a few things. And also another concern I have is I found the airplane to be a pain in my neck. this constant upkeep of the plane. It seems like every enemy that came was like, let's hurt your plane. I'm like, I have to. And I didn't even use the plane. Sometimes I get off the plane and I would be traveling. I'm like, oh, we need to go to a port to get that plane to come back to us. But that's fine. That's very minor. I just think the mechanisms here are so strong. Even the way of awakening totems, which I didn't go over in the overview, but essentially you got to collect a certain number of resources. The resources clearly have value. Some are way better than others. Mm-hmm. And so as you collect these, you may be like, oh, I want to awaken this totem. And it's so exciting when you do awaken a totem and find out it's this awesome thing, this awesome new thing you get. So I love that. The bosses are cool. You feel epic fights. And what are those pages called?
Wandering Encounters.
Why are they called Wandering Encounters? Yeah. Well, the Wandering Encounter really gives you the idea of you being in a living, breathing world, because you have a party, and as the game goes by, your party just goes together. But when you get to one of these, you're like, you go to that shop, I'll go over here, I'm going to go peek in this dark alley or whatever. And I find that to be very fun from a thematic element. So there's a lot of things here that are better. Some things I don't love as much. It's just it's still going to be good. If you like the first one, I feel pretty confident saying you'll like this one. An 8.5 for me.
All right, I'm actually coming in a little bit lower, but I still love this game. It is an 8 for me. A couple of things that held it back for me. For me, it is a solo or two-player game. I think for me, I can't imagine playing with more than that. It may work, but for me, it was solo or two players. It takes up a lot of the table, and it is an RPG at its core. So you've got to know that you're going to be wandering around a lot, and it's kind of a slow burn building that up, which all that I do enjoy, but number one, I like the Wandering Encounters are what really got me excited. When one of those happens, or the battles, I like the battles too, but the Wandering Encounters, when someone discovers one of those, you're like, oh buddy, what are we doing now? That was, for me, the highlight of the game. And I really, really enjoyed those, and that itself just wants me to go back and discover more of those on the map.
Well, this one is tricky because it is so similar to Sleeping Gods, which I believe I rated a 9. So I kind of have to use that as my base point because this is very clearly the successor to Sleeping Gods, and it has more similarities than differences. Although they did a really neat thing in the back of the rule book where it says, already played Sleeping Gods, ? And they go through everything that was different. And when I look through that, I'm looking at it right now, actually. Every single change they made was to the positive for me. Combat went from something I actively avoided to something that I didn't avoid in this one. And there weren't a lot of combats either. It felt like they were more frequent and more punishing in Sleeping Gods. We've talked about the Wandering Encounters. I love those. It almost gives you a little bit of a Forgotten Waters feel right there in the middle of it, which is really cool. There's also, without giving away spoilers, some mini games that are incorporated throughout the main campaign that I love. I love the mini games. So everything has been improved to me. I like the greater direction rather than being a little bit more freeform, but your mileage may vary on that. And so I'm coming in a 9.5 because if Sleeping Gods is a 9, which I think it is, this is a 9.5. You can't go wrong with either. If you have Sleeping Gods, and if you have not finished the campaign, there's no reason to get this. Finish your campaign in Sleeping Gods and maybe play some more because you've got hours of content there. But if you've played through Sleeping Gods, you loved it, you've gone through a couple of campaigns and you want more, but maybe some slightly improved mechanics, then definitely go here. If you haven't played either, I would probably recommend Distant Skies.
That's very reasonable. I think this is a good starting point. You don't need, again, you need to know nothing. I don't know if there's even any crossover theme-wise at all. There might be, and I don't know about it.
Slight.
So, yeah, well, there you go, folks. That is Sleeping Gods, Distant Skies, another masterpiece from Red Raven Games. I'm Tom Bassel.
I'm Joey Evans.
And I'm Mike DeLisio.
We'll see you next time.
In the sky.